I had never really considered how different alien anatomy could be until today, and yet here I was, panicking like a rookie while my alien maid writhed under me. She wasn't just slippery, she was chaotic, unpredictable, and her body seemed to have a mind of its own, which, frankly, was terrifying. I moved carefully, convinced I was being careful, but every subtle flinch she made sent sparks of energy bouncing off the walls, lights flickering in random patterns, and the blender spinning violently like it had a vendetta against me. "Do you always make such a mess?" I asked, voice cracking between confusion and arousal, trying not to trip over the toaster that had suddenly levitated. She hissed in that way that was half annoyance, half amusement, and I realized, with a sinking thrill, that she loved making me panic. Her limbs didn't work the way human limbs did. She twisted in ways that should have been impossible, coiling, folding, and rebounding like a spring loaded with alien energy. I tried to hold her still, but every attempt triggered some bizarre chain reaction. The rug curled up like it was trying to escape, the refrigerator hummed angrily, and the ceiling fan reversed direction, narrowly missing my hair. My brain scrambled to process, but my other instincts, well, they didn't care. "You're enjoying this way too much, aren't you?" I muttered, half laughing, half panicked as she wriggled and squirmed. Her glowing eyes blinked in a pattern that, if I understood alien body language at all, clearly meant she was having the time of her life watching me flail. I nearly fell backward when the coffee maker, apparently offended by our activities, exploded a torrent of frothy liquid across the floor. Maybe I underestimated your flexibility," I admitted, breath hitching as she twitched again. Every twitch made something around us malfunction. The lamp above my head swung like a pendulum, the toaster shot out toast with alarming force, and the smart vacuum whirred in panic, trapped under a pile of alien limbs. I was halfway terrified, halfway exhilarated, and entirely unsure whether I should apologize, run, or just surrender to the chaos. Her tail, or what I assumed was a tail, lashed against the countertop, sending dishes flying like they were in zero gravity. I grabbed onto her arms to stabilize her, but she squirmed and coiled around me, like an octopus that had just discovered mischief. I yelped as a pile of books toppled over, narrowly missing my toes, and I realized that nothing in my house was safe. Every inch of furniture, every gadget, every appliance had turned into an active participant in our unconventional intimacy. Her muffled chuckle, oddly musical, filled the air, vibrating through the walls and somehow syncing with the flickering lights. I paused to catch my breath and noticed the subtle signs that maybe, just maybe, this chaos was intentional. She wasn't trying to escape, she was orchestrating a performance, and I was the unwilling audience, and yet I couldn't help but be enraptured. The blender flung its contents at the ceiling, the sofa shifted on its own like it had somewhere better to be, and I clutched her, determined not to be flung out of my own home. I realized with a mix of dread and excitement that tonight was going to be unforgettable, not because of anything I had planned, but because my alien maid had other ideas. Her eyes glowed brighter, and in that moment, the lights dimmed and the walls seemed to lean in, like the house itself was part of our chaotic ballet. I laughed, I groaned, I panicked, and I marveled, realizing that my normal life was gone forever. This was only the beginning. She twisted again, and I swear the living room almost filed a formal complaint. Every wriggle she made set something else in motion. A stack of magazines toppled like a waterfall, a vase spun on the coffee table like it was auditioning for a circus act, and the ceiling lamp dangled dangerously, mocking my inability to keep control. I tried to adjust my grip, thinking maybe if I held her firmly, things would settle. Nope. Her alien anatomy had other plans. Every coil and flail sent us bouncing in directions that made no sense, and my voice cracked between panic and desperate arousal. "Are you always this energetic?" I gasped, catching a floating remote as it zipped past my head. She glared, or at least I assumed it was a glare, since her eyes seemed to dance in shifting colors, before twisting again, and a whoosh of air sent my papers spiraling into a perfect tornado above the kitchen counter. I stumbled backward, slipping slightly on a trail of spilled smoothie that had inexplicably emerged from the fridge, and she laughed, a sound that was half musical, half predator, and entirely maddening. The house had officially joined the party. My robotic vacuum whirred in panic, dodging flying utensils, while the holographic assistant flickered in alarm, declaring, "Warning! Unstable biological interaction detected!" I waved it off, because really, who needed warnings when chaos was clearly mandatory? She coiled tighter, every subtle shudder creating a chain reaction that had me hugging her closer just to survive. Her glowing limbs struck against the counter, sending dishes clattering, and I yelped when a pan shot across the room like a missile. "Seriously, do you enjoy making me look like a fool?" I yelled, half laughing, half panicking. She smirked, or at least I think it was a smirk, and twitched again. A small crate of laundry slid off the sofa, spilling socks like tiny alien confetti, and somehow a plant sprouted a temporary glow in response to her movement. My mind short-circuited trying to rationalize physics, biology, and lust simultaneously. Her tail whipped around, knocking over the blender, again, and I dove instinctively to catch it, only for her limbs to coil tighter around me. The blender erupted, sending a mix of fruit and yogurt across the kitchen floor. I gagged slightly, flinched, and then realized she was giggling at my reaction. That sound, a combination of amusement and teasing, made my heart race faster than I cared to admit. The more she struggled, the more I panicked, and the more I panicked, the more she seemed to enjoy it. Double entendres floated through my panicked brain as I tried to focus. "You really know how to make a guy work under pressure," I muttered, barely catching a floating toaster midair. She hissed, the sound echoing like a bass line to our chaotic symphony, and twisted her glowing form in ways that made me question both physics and my life choices. Everything was going wrong, and yet everything felt dangerously right. I realized then that my alien maid wasn't just reacting, she was performing. Every flail, every coil, every subtle twist of her body was a deliberate play designed to make me flail, stumble, and completely lose control. I might have been panicking, but she was clearly enjoying it on a level I couldn't comprehend, and honestly, it was thrilling. By the time I caught a floating book, narrowly avoiding an airborne plate, I realized the entire living room was a disaster zone. Papers fluttered, appliances sputtered, and holographic notifications screamed their protests. And yet, through the madness, I found myself laughing, groaning, and desperately trying to keep up with her chaotic energy. Her laughter echoed, and in a sudden synchronized jolt, she flipped slightly, sending me sliding into the sofa, tangled with her, tangled with the flying cushions, and somehow both of us laughing despite minor injuries, smoothie stains, and the general carnage surrounding us. I knew then that this wasn't just chaos, it was intimacy, alien style, and I was hopelessly hooked. And just when I thought I had a moment to breathe, she wriggled again, and a lamp exploded in spark-filled protest, confirming one simple truth: nothing in this house, or my life, would ever be the same again. She twisted again, and this time I was certain the entire house had entered witness protection against our antics. Every flail of her glowing limbs set off another chain reaction. Cushions launched into the air, holographic projectors flickered and sputtered, and the robotic pet, clearly traumatized, zigzagged across the floor like it had declared war on gravity itself. I clutched her tighter, trying to maintain some semblance of control, but she coiled, wriggled, and flailed in ways that seemed biologically impossible, leaving me both terrified and wildly entertained. "Are you trying to kill me or just rearranging my furniture in creative ways?" I shouted, slipping on the smoothie puddles she'd inadvertently created earlier. She hissed, or at least it sounded like a hiss, and I realized her expressions were a language of chaos that only she understood. Every squirm sent sparks from the countertop, flickered the lights, and caused the blender to erupt, showering fruit pulp like some alien-themed confetti cannon. I ducked just in time to avoid a flying spatula, mumbling something about intergalactic safety standards that clearly didn't apply here. Her tail whipped around, knocking over a stack of plates, and I groaned as I tried to keep my balance while clinging to her alien curves. She laughed, musical, teasing, and absolutely maddening, and twitched again, sending the robotic vacuum spinning into a pile of laundry. "You're enjoying this way too much," I said, voice strained, still dodging airborne household items. She smirked, a slow, deliberate movement that said clearly, yes, I am. Each of her movements became more deliberate, more chaotic, and I realized this wasn't a struggle, it was a performance. She was showing off, testing my reflexes, my stamina, and apparently my tolerance for flying cookware. Every squirm was an innuendo, every coil a flirtation, and every flail a dare. I groaned, my brain mixing panic with undeniable arousal as a toaster shot past my head, narrowly missing my ear. "Do you always treat chores like this?" I gasped, clinging to her as she twisted yet again, accidentally summoning a faint glow from the potted plant in the corner. She hissed, teasing, and I realized that our previous encounters had been warm-ups compared to this. Her alien body was unpredictable, her reactions hilarious, and her teasing lethal. The house had become a playground of absurdity, a circus of sparks, floating objects, and minor chaos, and we were the stars. I tried to stabilize her, to anticipate her movements, but every attempt backfired. Her limbs coiled, rebounded, and ricocheted off counters, knocking over utensils, a stack of magazines, and the holographic assistant, which now beeped in sheer panic. I yelped, gripping her tighter as she laughed again, that musical, teasing sound that made me both nervous and impossibly aroused. She wasn't escaping, she was orchestrating, directing, and performing a slapstick erotic ballet that I had no choice but to participate in. The kitchen counter tilted, sending a teacup flying like a rocket, and I barely caught it while balancing on a pile of scattered cushions. Her glowing body flared as she squirmed, and I realized that I was no longer controlling the situation, she was. And yet I couldn't bring myself to care. Every chaotic flail, every minor explosion, every awkward tumble was somehow thrilling, ridiculous, and intensely intimate. By the time I managed to steady her for a fleeting second, we were both panting, laughing, and surrounded by the aftermath of our madness, floating objects, spilled liquids, and appliances on the brink of rebellion. She leaned into me, a sly, mischievous grin on her face, clearly enjoying the chaos she had created, and I realized that tonight was no longer about control, it was about surrender, trust, and the most bizarre, exhilarating intimacy I had ever experienced. And just as I thought I might catch my breath, she twitched again, sending the lamp above us spinning, the robotic pet yelping, and the ceiling projector firing sparks like fireworks. My heart raced, my mind reeled, and I laughed, realizing that we had reached a peak of absurd, erotic chaos that was entirely, wonderfully unstoppable. I had finally stopped trying to fight the chaos, realizing that resisting her only made everything worse. She twisted again, and instead of panicking, I leaned into it, anticipating her impossible movements, letting her lead the madness. Every coil, every squirm, every flail became a dance we controlled together, or at least controlled as much as a house full of exploding appliances, flying utensils, and levitating cushions would allow. The living room had become a playground, and we were both gleeful participants, caught in a symphony of erotic chaos. Her glowing limbs struck the counters, sending a cascade of fruit, books, and holographic confetti into the air. I laughed, groaned, and ducked, realizing that her struggle had transformed into a signal, a mischievous invitation to keep up, to improvise, and to fully embrace the absurdity of the moment. She hissed, her sound teasing and almost melodic, and I responded with a grin, leaning closer, matching her movements, letting the chaos carry us rather than fearing it. The robotic pet zipped past, narrowly avoiding collision with the blender, and I grabbed it midair, tossing it gently aside as she twisted again. Her tail whipped a lamp, which exploded in a harmless shower of sparks, making the room glow like a tiny festival of destruction. I shouted something unintelligible, half laughter, half adrenaline, and she hissed back, the sound vibrating through the walls, syncing with the flickering lights. It was absurd, ridiculous, and somehow profoundly intimate. "Are you trying to kill me, or just impress me?" I yelled, still managing to dodge floating plates and airborne cushions. She coiled tighter, her body flashing with alien energy, and in that moment, I understood fully, she wasn't trying to escape, wasn't resisting, she was playing, teasing, testing, and enjoying the chaos as much as I was, maybe more. Her eyes glowed brighter, reflecting sparks from the ceiling projector, and I realized that this wild, uncontrolled energy was the ultimate intimacy between us. We moved together now, instinctively, balancing on scattered cushions, avoiding flying utensils, and laughing in perfect synchronization. Every flail of her limbs became a flirtatious invitation, every twitch a challenge I accepted with exhilaration. The house was a disaster, appliances malfunctioning, lights flickering, holograms protesting, but we didn't care. This was our world now, and the chaos had become a playground for desire, humor, and mutual understanding. Her final, dramatic squirm sent me sliding across the floor, tangled in her glowing limbs, just as a floating blender lid spun past my face. I caught it with a groan, pulling her close, and she hissed in laughter, a sound that made my chest tighten with desire. The living room was a wreck, but somehow, perfectly balanced in its absurdity. I realized then that nothing in my life had prepared me for this, for her, for the combination of erotic chaos and playful intelligence that defined her every movement. We collapsed together in a pile of pillows, cushions, and floating debris, laughing, panting, and tangled in a mess of limbs, wires, and alien energy. She leaned against me, her body still glowing faintly, and I realized that in all the chaos, all the flying furniture, all the explosions and mishaps, we had found a rhythm, a connection, and an intimacy that was uniquely ours. "Next time," I muttered, breathless, "maybe warn me before you start the gymnastics." She hissed softly, glowing brighter in amusement, and I laughed, realizing that normal was officially over, replaced by chaotic, hilarious, and wildly erotic evenings that would define our bond forever. As we lay there, covered in smoothie, sparks, and laughter, I understood the truth. Chaos was our language, slapstick our foreplay, and the alien maid beside me was the most unpredictable, exhilarating partner I could ever imagine. And I wouldn't have it any other way.